better daily, where we work hard in our minds, bodies, and our spirits to become 1% better every single day. Download the app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.life to catch the video version of these podcasts. Here's your host and my dad, Alex Van Houten.
Good morning, Better family. What is up? Today is Wildcard Wednesday, and I'm your host, Alex Van Houten, and we are in Better Daily Live, and we get to talk about whatever we want. So today, we're going to be talking about measures that matter. Measures that matter. It's a very powerful concept, especially in the exercise and nutrition world. But when it comes to the idea of becoming 1% better every single day, there are a myriad of ways that you can measure your progress. Today, I'm going to center on the physical, and the episode I'm going to link you to is actually from the Defining Dad Bod podcast about 3 years ago, where I taught dads how to decode their body fat percentage, what those measures actually mean and what they tell you about yourself and different methods of getting there and which ones were accurate, which ones weren't so accurate, and all the above, right? So in this Wildcard Wednesday, though, I want to walk you through some things about measures that matter, because I've had some conversations recently that reminded me how important it is to understand what progress you're making and to understand, at what level or what rate you're making that progress. Good morning, KT. Good to see you this morning. So this conversation came about because I was speaking with an individual about how her heart rate is changing during her exercise walking up hills and stuff. And she was talking about, I noticed my heart rate was changing this way. I was trying to get my heart rate in these zones. Then, I noticed that there was a dip. And so is that a bad thing or a good thing? So I want to talk about that because when it comes to making progress in your body, everybody wants to see a change and everybody wants to feel a change. Like, you want to feel rewarded for your good work, right? One of the actual problems of 1% better daily is it's such a gradual improvement that you don't notice it very often. Like, you might get little glimpses here or there, people might notice here or there, but you don't notice it very often. And because you don't notice it, sometimes it's difficult to get motivated and inspired by the progress that you've made. 1% better daily on large time scales, you can see a difference between yourself now and a difference between yourself in the past, because if you've been working on 1% better daily for 5 years, you can go, okay, well, 5 years ago, here's where I was. I could only run this fast, or I could only lift this much weight, or I only got this much sleep, or I was only this loving toward my children. And so there are many different things that you can compare yourself to 5 years ago. But if you're making 1% better daily now, it's hard to see a change week over week. It's hard to look into your week and go, oh, I made changes here and it was good. And that's right, KT. She said this is why having a coach is a great tool. That's actually one of the biggest things that I do for my clients is I help them to recognize their progress. And I know guiding the path and helping them find the right way to go forward as far as their program's concerned is important as a coach. But I have to also be able to show them how they're moving forward, how they're making progress, and what they're working toward. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Pat. Thanks for joining us. So I want to walk through a list of measures that matter, things that you might either are doing now or maybe haven't thought about. And I would love to hear from you. What measures are you taking now that matter to you? And I'll pose that question here to those of you who are joining us live. And then for those of you who are catching us afterward in the replay in the comments, I'd love to hear what measures are you tracking right now to see your progress. So actually, I'm going to start with performance measures because everybody likes body composition measures. Is the scale changing? Are my clothes fitting better? How much fat have I lost? Like, people want to know those numbers. But what's really interesting to me is oftentimes when you're working toward 1% better, you'll notice the performance measures actually change faster than the body composition measures, which would make sense, right? If you understand these measures, if you understand how the changes are happening in your body, then you know that the changes that occur in your body that create body composition will actually be reflected in performance first. So there's cardiovascular performance. That's actually, there's a whole field of study around what's called VO2 measures. VO2 measures are just the different ways that we can estimate that you're getting better at moving oxygen from the air around you to your cells and then moving the carbon dioxide waste out of your body quickly. And VO2 is a measure of how much your body's able to do in this moment, given how much you weigh. So that said, VO2 measures are a lot of fun. There's a bunch of different ones out there. There's the old school, in the training world, we called it old school, the Ymca step test, which was, it's going to sound kind of complicated because it is. There are better measures than this we can talk about in a second. But the Ymca step test was you step on a 12-inch step and then step down on that 12-inch step, and you have to keep the cadence of 1 step per second, and you have to do that for 3 minutes. And you measure the heart rate at the end of the 3 minutes, and then you measure the heart rate 1 minute after the end of the 3 minutes. And then that actually could be plugged into an equation, and you could get a VO2 measure. So I know that sounds really complicated. What I do with my clients, because one, the Ymca step test is rough on people who have knee issues, and most people who come to me have knee issues in some form or fashion. But also the Ymca step test is not very effective once you get well trained. And so what I like to do is I like to do a 1 mile or half mile timed walk run. So a half mile for those who are just getting into the actual progress of health and fitness, and then a 1 mile walk run for those who have been at it for a while. And what those tell me is they're good measures of cardiovascular endurance, and you can actually calculate VO2 from those as well. Long story short, if you are traveling half a mile faster in 2 weeks than you are right now, then you're making progress. And that's wonderful. And I do this with my clients probably every 6 weeks or so, if we're looking for changes in cardiovascular endurance. But maybe you're not much of a walker or runner, and you'd still like to be able to measure cardiovascular endurance. So another measure that you might do is called a 1,000-meter row test. 1,000 meters on the row machine, and you do it for time, and you try to get the shortest amount of time possible for your 1,000 meters. And that's a great test. Lasts somewhere between 4 and 8 minutes, depending on how well you can row, and you can actually derive some VO2 measures from that as well. It's not quite as accurate as the walk running, but it's still pretty accurate. And you can do the same thing. There's so many ways that you could just pick an arbitrary distance that you can travel quickly, and your goal is to see how well your cardiovascular system's holding up to this. Ideally, the test will last you longer than 3 minutes. 3 minutes is about the threshold for your cardiovascular system to really be the limiting factor for you. If it's shorter than that, it's usually musculoskeletal, meaning, let's say you do a 1 minute walk run. How far can you travel in 1 minute? Well, that's going to reflect more how well your legs are in shape, how strong they are, how powerful your glutes are, how strong your calves are, and how bouncy they are. It's going to measure that more so than your cardiovascular system, because once you've gone past a minute, the cardiovascular system is having to replenish your reserves in your muscles. And so you can't rely just on your muscles. In running, we often say, are your legs holding you back or are your lungs holding you back? And that's a understanding of that differentiation. So those are some cardiovascular performance measures. I'd love to know, what are you doing to know whether or not you're making progress cardiovascularly? And for some of us, if you've been in fitness long enough, you know that your goal is not to lose cardiovascular fitness, at least as long as possible, right? Like I'm not trying to break my mile record from 18 years old. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But what I am trying to do is not get any slower every year. That's my goal, is to maintain that speed and cardiovascular endurance. And KT says the same thing. She says, hey, I'm trying to stay at my current level as I get older and changing on the steps that need to be taken to stay the same. And that's well said, because, when you're working on 1% better daily and you improve yourself really close to your genetic potential, your threshold. We're not always going to infinitely improve. We can't shave 10 seconds off our mile time every week for the next 2 years. That's not going to happen for us, because there is a threshold. There is a mortal limit, right? But once we reach those thresholds for ourselves, the goal is maintain very good physical health, so that throughout our life, our physical health is not an impediment to our mental and spiritual well-being. And that's powerful and important. So other performance measures you might care about are things like strength and power. You can do things like a vertical jump test, or you can do a deadlift. I love the strength to weight ratio deadlift test for my clients, which is 3 reps, 3-rep max deadlift, the most weight they can lift with great form, and then divide that by their body weight. And that gives me a good measure of how their strength to weight ratio is changing. You want it to improve. You want to be stronger versus how much you weigh, and then you want to maintain that strength as you train. You can also do things like the military loves strength endurance measures. So things like 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, or pull-ups to failure. That sort of thing can be powerful. And there might be some people in this group who like, hey, I've been working on a pull-up for a while. I can't get it yet without help. And your goal, your improvement goal, is to use less and less assistance every time that you do your pull-up test. And that's a powerful measure of progress as well. And then last but not least, from the performance front, I also like to emphasize flexibility. So the classic flexibility test is can you touch your toes with your legs straight, right? That's called the sit and reach. And you can actually measure how many more inches you have until you touch your toes, or how many inches past your toes you can reach. So that's a powerful measure of flexibility as well. And, I love that. KT recommends that we give this a shot, that we could do like a pull-up or push-up kind of measure for ourselves, post that, and then follow up in 3 months or 6 months so that everybody can see how we're all improving and whatnot. I think that would be a lot of fun. That might be a good way to start the new year. Thanks for throwing that out there. So the last thing then is the body composition. And like I said, performance measures are generally a better measure to understand the changes that are happening in the immediate, because body composition follows suit. Imagine your performance is changing because your muscles are growing, and because your metabolic fluid is increasing, and because your blood volume is increasing, and because your mitochondrial density is increasing, right? All of these positive and powerful adaptations are changing. And so you can see that reflected in your performance relatively immediate. Like it's crazy when somebody goes from not exercising to exercising. I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but you improve rapidly. It's almost crazy how fast you can improve, right? But then what I often hear is like, oh no, what am I doing wrong? The scale's not changing. It could be some weeks. It could be a significant amount of weeks, depending on how much muscle you can grow and how deconditioned you were, and how quickly your body's willing to shed your body fat, right? And so body composition measures oftentimes are overemphasized in the betterment journey because they're looked at as if like I should see these changes faster. But that's not how the body works. It changes, it adapts, and then your body begins to reflect those changes over time, right? So if you grow a lot of muscle, for instance, and your VO2 is increasing, your body fat will decrease. Is it going to decrease all at once? Well, no. It's going to take some time for your body to burn through those excess fuel stores, to change your hormonal makeup so that you're not always riding the blood sugar roller coaster. And it's going to take some time for your body to trust you that you're going to feed those muscles you just grew well, right? And that's very simplified version of how those things come about. But these measures are powerful and important. I mean, obviously, hopping on the scale isn't a bad thing to do, but don't put so much stock in the weight, because that's like the last thing that I pay attention to as a trainer. What I use are the circumferences and calipers and pictures of my clients. So circumferences is just, measuring tape. I go around the shoulder, I go around the chest, I go around the waist, the belly button, and the smallest area around the waist. That'll give you a good differential between how the smallest area in the waist is changing versus what's changing around the belly button. Then the hips, that's the largest area around your glutes. Then your thighs, that's about halfway between your knee and biceps and calf, right? So those are all circumference measures. Those reflect how your clothes are fitting you. So some people will say, I know I'm changing based on the clothes I'm wearing, and that's good. That's about the same idea as taking circumferences, only circumferences are numbers. Pat says, yes, the weight doesn't change overnight. Yeah, true story, right? Actually, the weight does change overnight. Sometimes you can gain 4 pounds after a great workout, so it's kind of scary. You're like, oh no, what did I do? I'm 4 pounds heavier. Like, don't worry so much about that. Let's look at your lows week over week, which we'll get to in a second. And then calipers. Calipers are a measure of the actual subcutaneous fat, the fat between your muscle and your skin, right? And so we pinch the tricep, we pinch the mid-axillary, we pinch the pectoral muscle, we pinch the subscapularis in the back, the suprailiac, the umbilical in the front, and then the thigh. And I can post a link if you guys care about how to do that and what those calculations look like. There are other ways to measure body fat, and that's what the episode I'm linking to you is going to talk you through. So the last one is a picture. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I say a picture is worth 1,000 measures. Sometimes just seeing yourself from the front, seeing yourself from the side, seeing yourself from the back will help you to understand how you're changing, right? And you're not always looking for like, oh no, that one thing I hate about myself isn't changing the way I want to see it. What you're looking for is what's different. What's different objectively? What's different about you here versus here? Do you see how your posture is changing? Do you see how your muscles are changing? Do you see how maybe one side of you is up, now it's not anymore? Do you see how your tone is changing overall, right? Just look for differences, and that will really help you start identifying that you're moving forward in a positive direction. I love one of the members of our group posted a picture of them about a year ago, and they weighed about 30 pounds less than they do now. But the 30 pounds that this guy has gained in the last year has been good gains. You can see it. You can see his shoulders and his arms and his chest, and he's not gaining a whole bunch of belly or anything. And so like he's looking great. He's doing great things for himself through his weight training practice. And so that's awesome. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is sometimes a picture can show you something that the numbers and the measures don't quite reveal. But no matter what measures you're taking, what I want you to know is that if you are performing actions in the present that are good, so you have changed something about your nutrition and it's sitting well with your digestive tract, you've changed something about your sleep and you're feeling more energetic, you've changed something about your supplements and you notice your skin looks a little different. If you're making positive changes, those 1% better daily changes in the present, I'm going to promise you something. And the promise is that never turns out bad. It just doesn't. Reality always rewards hard work and intelligent change. And whether or not you get to see the results immediately, you don't have control over that. But what you do have control over is showing up every day and doing what you know is right. That's what you have control over. And that's powerful and that's good. And if there's some point in there where you feel like, you know what, I've been showing up and I'm doing what I think is right every single day. And well, I've been doing that for like 6 months and I don't see the progress. I just don't see it. Then connect with me. Maybe we're doing something wrong there. Maybe we're not as well informed as we could be, or maybe we're not measuring the right thing. And so I'd love to help you with that. Guys, this has been Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live. Thank you guys for joining me for Wildcard Wednesday. I hope you'll check out this episode, Decoding Body Fat Percentage, and the many different ways that we can measure that. Until tomorrow, which is Word Thursday, it's just 1%. You got this. Body composition. I want to talk to you about what it is, why measure it, and what different methods there are out there to measure it. And then I want to talk to you about what I actually do for myself and my clients that I work with. So without further ado, body composition. What is it? Let's start with an easy definition. Body composition is what your body is composed of. It's everything that makes up your body. So when you step on a scale, you get a weight, which is simply the entirety of your body pushing against the earth. It's a measure of how much force your overall mass is pushing into the earth. That's important because it doesn't differentiate what kind of mass it is. Hair, skin, nails, water, fat, muscle, the size of your heart, all of it is enclosed in that one very small, very unspecific measure of, quote, weight. This is really important to me as a trainer because many people come to me with a weight loss goal. However, weight as a measure just doesn't really tell you much. And I can hear you saying, well, wait a minute, Alex, when I was 20 years old, I weighed about 40 pounds less than I do right now, and I was in much better shape then. What do you mean weight doesn't tell you much? Well, I'll tell you now that if we started with a measure of weight, then it would look something along the lines of, hey, I'd like to lose 40 pounds in the next, year. What you should know is that in this next month, if you do everything right, you eat very well, you exercise regularly, you do stuff that will adapt you positively in the right direction, you're more active, you get more sleep, yada, 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 you might find that you don't lose a single pound of weight. In fact, you might even gain a pound. And if that's the only measure that you're taking, then you're going to be extremely discouraged. You can be like, what the heck? I did all these things right. Why in the world didn't I lose the weight
that I wanted to lose or should lose doing all these things right. I feel better, I'm starting to look better, but the number on the scale is not budging. Well, in the first month of physiological adaptation to an exercise program, you actually, increase blood volume. That means that your body increases the amount of blood that's actually flowing through your veins in order to help you carry more nutrients to your muscles and carry waste away from your muscles so that you can keep providing them energy and pulling away the stuff that they're creating as a byproduct of your workout program. Another adaptation is that when you wake up your muscles after you haven't been consistent for a while, they actually start to retain some water. Not in a bad way, we call it intracellular water. And that water allows them to create more energy and to do more work for you in the gym. And those two adaptations alone in your first month of starting a program could definitely offset any fat you might have burned in terms of weight. They are very positive adaptations. You'll look better because of them. You'll burn more calories because of them. You have more muscle mass because of them. You'll burn more fat in the future because of them. But you won't weigh any less because those will offset any fat that you've actually burned in that first month. I often tell many clients that don't expect any actual weight loss until at least weeks 4 through 8, if not even longer. And that's not because my programs suck. It's simply because weight doesn't actually tell you everything that's changing. And similarly, many people often get body composition confused with BMI. BMI is actually body mass index. And just like weight, it doesn't tell you much more information than how much force you're exerting on the earth. It has one additional piece of information tied up in the number itself, which mathematically is simply your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Or in layman's terms, how much do you weigh compared to how tall you are? Doctors and insurance companies really like to use this measure to track your weight because it's simple, but again, it's not a very specific measure of whether or not you're achieving some sort of body composition change. Again, body mass index doesn't tell you how much muscle you've gained. Body mass index doesn't tell you what your blood volume is. Body mass index doesn't tell you how much fat or brain tissue or anything is actually pushing down on the scale. It's simply your weight divided by your height squared. So if you have some sort of goal related to changing how your body looks or how much you weigh, then here I'm going to recommend that you track your body composition. There are a number of ways to do this. We'll talk about it in just a little bit, but let's take a second to talk about why you would measure body composition regardless of your goal. So first of all, if you have a weight loss goal, it kind of goes without saying that you're going to want to know whether or not the weight you're actually losing or the weight you're actually gaining, whether that's a good thing or actually moving in the direction of your goal. If you're going to track some sort of progress each month, you want to take a measure that's going to advise you well. And weight just doesn't do that for the reasons I just explained. But let's say you have a goal that revolves more around the vitality of your life. How good you feel today, how many medications you are or aren't on, what your level of pain is, those kind of things. Why would you measure body composition if you're just interested in at least maintaining your current level of health or improving it on some level? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. There are two answers to that. The first answer is if you're already very happy with where you're at body composition wise, then you should know what that number actually looks like in terms of body fat percentage or pounds of lean body tissue. Just in case something changes negatively in the future, you can at least have a baseline marker of where you currently are so that you can work to get back to that number. There's nothing worse to me than when somebody comes to me as a personal trainer and says, hey, I'm not in the kind of shape I'd like to be in. And I'll say, okay, when was the last time you were in the kind of shape you wanted to be in? Oh, when I was like 20, everything fit right and I was in a really good spot. And I say, okay, great. What was your body fat percentage then? And they're like, I don't know. Well, crap, now we have nothing to go by in order to see, hey, when are we at a good spot that's comparable to when you were in your 20s? As a trainer, I want to be able to show you progress, and as a person, you should care to have a baseline measure to inform your decisions in the future. The second answer to that is that many diseases and medications are actually directly related to your body composition. The higher your fat percentage goes versus your lean body mass, the more likely you are to develop cardiovascular disease, diabetes, thyroid dysfunction, and a slew of other things that might require medical attention. If your goal is health and vitality, body composition is an important measure for you to ensure that you're not falling into some kind of problematic range for yourself. What's that range actually look like for you? Well, it differs by age, since as we grow older, we are susceptible to what's called sarcopenia, which is the degradation of muscle tissue as it's replaced by the accumulation of fat tissue. I'm sorry, that's just what happens as we age. We can slow it down, but we can't stop it. It's a crappy byproduct of mortality. But in general, if you're under the age of 40, men are shooting for between 12% and 18% body fat, whereas women are looking somewhere between 20% and 25% body fat. Now, these are measures that are connected to general health and well-being. If you're lower than that, that's fine from a performance perspective. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you're beyond that range, know that I'm not saying, you're diseased if you're higher than this body fat percentage. But what I am saying is that if you're outside of that range, your body composition could have a detrimental effect on your health. Now, if you're older than 40, the numbers go up a little bit. If you're a man, we're looking at 15% to 22% being acceptable and in a healthy range. Whereas for females over 40, we're looking at 25% to 30% being an acceptable range for health and well-being. I can put a link to those data masses below. My take-home message here is even if you don't have a weight loss goal, I hope that you'll go get a baseline measure for your health and vitality so that you can either maintain that measure or work to put it in a beneficial range. Last but not least, if you have a performance goal, body composition is going to be an extremely important measure for you. First, if you're trying to run faster, jump higher, compete in a Ninja Warrior obstacle course race, then anything on your body that's not helping you achieve that goal doesn't need to be there. So for instance, if I have 5 extra pounds of fat on me that I don't need, every single time my foot strikes the ground while I'm running, that's 7 times the amount of weight on my knee that needs to be there. So 7 times 5 is 35. If I lost 5 pounds of fat while I'm training for my half marathon or full marathon, that's 35 pounds of force I'm taking off of my knees, and I'll prevent injuries that way. Similarly, for those of you who are Ninja Warrior fans out there and know that I'm working to train for that myself, any extra mass, fat mass, or even muscle mass that I don't need is detrimental to me while I'm running up a wall or trying to do the salmon ladder effectively. So even if you're happy with your current body image and you don't see any value in tracking body composition because, hey, I'm just trying to deadlift heavier or run faster or whatever it is, I still highly recommend that as you start the year, you do a body composition assessment on yourself so you know how many pounds of fat are on you, how many pounds of muscle are on you, and you can at least make sure that those are conducive to your optimal performance goals-wise. So now that we've talked about what body composition actually is and what it's not, and why we should measure it regardless of our goal, let's talk about what methods are out there in order to measure your body composition. So remember, body composition's not weight, it's also not BMI. In general, when we measure body composition, what we're really looking for is an overall number of, quote, body fat percentage, meaning what percentage of your current weight is estimated to be fat. So if I weigh 200 pounds and I'm 10% body fat, 10% of 200 is 20 pounds. That means I have 20 pounds of fat on my body, which would leave 180 pounds of something else. We call that something else LBM, lean body mass. That doesn't necessarily mean muscle. It literally means everything else. So muscle tissue, water, your heart, your lungs, your brain, your hair, everything but fat makes up that LBM number. And so this measure is estimated in a number of ways. The 2 cheapest ways to measure body composition are by circumference and calipers. Circumference is simply just taking a tape measure around your midsection or around your bicep or whatever the formula calls for, whereas calipers are those really fun pinchy looking things that will pinch your fat and hopefully pull away the fat from the muscle tissue and give you a measure in millimeters of how much subcutaneous fat is in that position. Now, how and where you actually take these measures largely depends on your estimation method. Note that these 2 methods are the cheapest way to measure body fat percentage, but their accuracy largely depends on the consistency with which you take the circumference measures and calipers. For instance, let's say the formula that I'm using to calculate body fat percentage I found online, and let's say I found a formula online that helps me calculate my body fat percentage, and what it needs to know is whether or not I'm male or female, what my age is, and what my millimeter pinches are for my triceps, my umbilical, which is right beside my belly button, and my thigh. Well, that can be a very helpful and accurate measure for me as long as I pinch the same place next to my belly button on my tricep and on my thigh. And the same thing stands for circumference. There are several tutorials on how to get these things done. I can put a link to a few of my favorites below so that if circumference and calipers are the way you want to track your body composition, you can get that done. You might need a partner. I've heard of people trying to do circumference and calipers on themselves. I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't really trust myself to get an accurate measure by myself, but it's not very difficult to recreate with somebody you trust and don't mind pinching your fat. And if you're married out there, just know that some people are very sensitive about their fat. You might be one of those too. So it could arguably be something that brings you closer to your spouse, but it has an equal chance of going the opposite direction. The next method is called bioelectric impedance, and bioelectric impedance operates on the principle of passing an electric signal through your body from one point to another and measuring how much your body actually impedes that electricity. To make it way less scientific, if you've ever added oil to water, you know they don't mix. And similarly, in your own body, there's no water in your fat tissue, or at least very little, and water is what actually conducts electricity in your body. So when you pass an electric signal from one point to another, it can give an estimation of how well your body conducts electricity. The more fat you have on your body, the less well you conduct electricity, and the other way around. Now, this method costs a little more than Circumference and Calipers. Depending on the equipment you use, it could cost as little as $20 and as expensive as $5,000 to have access to the equipment that will give you a bioelectric impedance reading. And you might have guessed it, the more expensive it is, the more accurate it is. There's actually a company called InBody who makes medical devices that tracks water in the body, and they have since gotten into the fitness world, and they have a product that is about as accurate as getting in an X-ray machine, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, that's a pretty expensive piece of equipment. Personally, I prefer the Circumference and Calipers to the bioelectric impedance method unless you have access to that very expensive piece of equipment that can give you a more accurate measure than one of those handheld things you can buy at Sports Authority. A note of caution, bioelectric impedance is very affected by how much water you've retained today. So if you've gone swimming, taken a long shower, drank a lot of water, or you're dehydrated, that can affect the body fat percentage that you get out of the equipment. And therefore, it's very important that if you're using this method to track your body composition, then you need to make sure that you measure in the same condition at all times. Generally, I like a non-work day in the morning before breakfast if possible, to get a consistent measure that can show me progress over time. And then the last two methods are specialty methods that most of us don't have access to unless we can just find a company that has these laying around, and that is hydrostatic weighing and the Dexa Scan. Hydrostatic weighing is just as it sounds. They put you in a vat of water and measure your displacement in the water, which sounds kind of weird, but they can actually get a very accurate body fat percentage measure on you. It's widely accepted in the scientific community that this is the second most accurate way to get a good absolute body fat measure. And the Dexa Scan is a method where they put you in an X-ray machine, and the X-ray fires at all of your tissues and measures the density of those tissues, and then uses several mathematical formulas in order to calculate how much mass you have of bone, how much mass you have of fat, how much mass you have of muscle, and similarly with water. And this is considered the gold standard among researchers for actually measuring body fat percentage. Now, a Dexa machine costs somewhere in the ballpark of $20,000, and there are many places that have them that'll charge you $50 to $100 for an assessment. So price can be a barrier. And secondly, I don't know about you, but I'm not very hip on the idea of shooting my body with x-rays on a regular basis while I'm trying to make body composition changes. As of right now, I don't know of anybody who blames Dexa for the generation of malignant cells or changes in their DNA, but personally, like I said, I wouldn't recommend doing that more than twice a year. Kinda like x-rays at your dentist. So there are quite a few different ways to measure body composition, and what I'd like to share with you is what I actually do for myself and what I do for my clients. When I work with a client, I need to know their weight, their height, several circumference measures, and caliper measures in order to track their body fat percentage over time. If for some reason I'm interested in corroborating my findings with something a little more consistent, then I'll help them find a resource for a good bioelectric impedance test with an InBody. But for circumference, we'll measure calf, thigh, waist, hip, chest, shoulders, and bicep. And for calipers, we do a 7-site, which is pectoral, tricep, subscap, mid-axillary, umbilical, suprailiac, and thigh. If you're interested in doing this for yourself, you can research any of that jargon by Googling it. For instance, the mid-axillary is under your arm where your third rib is along your chest line. And then I use their weight, their height, their gender, and those measures to calculate their body fat percentage based on a formula. And you can find those formulas again via Google, and I'm sure there's some kind of app for that. But I'm an old school junkie, I put it all in Excel. What I really love about using that method is, sure, I will get a moderately accurate body fat percentage measure. But what I'm more interested in are the actual measures themselves. So when I see somebody go from 28% body fat down to 20% body fat, that's like, wow, you lost 8% body fat. That's amazing. We can talk about that in terms of how many pounds of fat you lost and how much lean body mass you gained. What's even more impactful than that is to be able to show my clients where they've actually lost that fat from. So if you're taking circumference and caliper measures, not only will you have, hey, wow, you were 28%, but now you're 20, great job. You'll also be able to say, wow, you lost 8 inches in your waist, or wow, your tricep used to measure 20 millimeters and now it's 10 millimeters. No more lunch lady arms for you. Or you know how you said you were collecting fat in your midsection? Well, your umbilical measure used to be 30 millimeters and you've dropped that down to 10, and that's why your six-pack's starting to show. That way, I have eyes on what's changed, I can celebrate the change specifically, and if something's not changing the way it should, I have eyes on that as well, and I can modify the program as I need to. So that's what I do for myself and my clients. Circumference measures and caliper measures, and then calculate body fat percentage from there and track the specific places where somebody's actually losing fat and gaining muscle. Before I leave you with these thoughts, I want to get one more point across that's really important to me when it comes to body composition. And that thought is about the difference between an absolute measure and the delta. When I'm doing body composition measures, I'm not really interested in what the absolute measure is for the average client. I know I gave you some parameters around health and well-being, but by and large, my training methodology, and a methodology that I hope you'll adopt for your own health and fitness goals this year, is that of progress. I'm not so much interested in that the healthy range for you is to be 18% body fat. Woohoo! That doesn't mean a lot to me. What matters to me is that if we measured you to be 30% body fat and we actually lost 2%, so now you're 28, I'm interested in the delta. That you lost 2%. That's called the delta, the change. In mathematics, if you care to know, delta is the Greek letter for change. Looks like a little triangle. I'm interested in that 2%. I'm not really interested that you're 28% body fat. Whoop-de-frickin-do. I really don't care what your actual body fat percentage. What I really, really care about is that you've made progress on it. And so when you're considering what measures you should actually take for your body composition, I encourage you not to obsess over what the absolute measure is, but that you take those measures so that you can see progress over time. And that's what you should be interested in when you're tracking body composition for your fitness goals in 2018. If this body composition show has been helpful for you, I hope that you'll give us a great review on iTunes and subscribe. Share it with people in your life who have been obsessing about weight as a measure, and consider helping out the show by going to definingdadbod.com/donate. Every little bit helps to keep us putting out great content, editing this sound stuff well, and getting the word out so we can spread the message of a healthy legacy for our sons and daughters. Until next time, decide on a body composition measure that's right for you and start tracking monthly. Kick butt, take names.
Thank you for joining us for your 1% Better today. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast. Leave us a raving review to tell others how Better Daily has helped you in your journey. If you want more Better Daily, download our app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live. Use code POD to get 25% off your subscription. That's POD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. We all have a cross to carry. It's lighter when we do it together. Go to betterdaily.live today.